Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to present this information to you today. What I'm going to talk a little bit about are the changes that happen as we age that can affect our nutritional intake, understanding malnutrition, ways to avoid or overcome it, a little bit about my plate, and then some cooking and shopping tips for one or two. So to begin with, every season of life brings changes and adjustments to your body, as I'm sure you are all very much aware of this. But understanding what's happening can really help take control so that we make sure we're getting the most nutritional foods that we can get and fulfilling those requirements. So physiological changes occur. They don't occur all at once and they do not occur fast, but they do happen. And they can affect nutritional intake. So one being vision, as Rachel had mentioned, as we age, the sharpness of our vision can change a bit, and that can actually affect our nutritional intake. For someone whose vision is not as sharp, they may not feel comfortable cooking, especially with the stove. They may not be able to read a food label. They may not look at the expiration dates on the foods that's in the refrigerator. I love that Rachel pointed that out. They may not be able to follow recipes as well. And even just grocery shopping, the vision can affect that. And then, of course, with hearing, our hearing decreases as we age, so they may not be eating out as much. You may notice that they can't talk to the cashier at the grocery store or even to the waiter, so that may affect a little bit more as well. And then, of course, the smell and taste. Does anybody know what's the first to decrease with smell and taste, with taste aspect? Our bitter and saltiness, that tends to decrease the most as we age. So you may notice an elderly person wants to salt their food a lot more. But in reality, as we age, we actually have less sodium intake needed. And then, of course, if we're told as we age we don't need to have as much sugar, cut back on the sugar. And then the salt, we may not want to eat as much of the foods because they don't taste the same. So one suggestion that we always try to encourage is to use herbs and spices when you cook instead of that salt to bring out different flavors. And then instead of adding sugar to your foods, you can actually use natural sugars like fruit, using sweet potatoes. I know when I cook spaghetti, I put pureed carrots in it, and that gives it a natural sweetener, and I've upped my vitamin, mineral, nutrient content, everything. So that's one thing to consider. Structural changes. As we age, we tend to lose lean body mass, and with that, we decrease our metabolism. Every year after age 40, our metabolism slows a bit. I'm sure you've noticed that we can't eat the same as we did when we were younger, because if we do, we're going to have a tendency to gain weight. We may be less physically active, so those two combinations right there may not be the best thing. So then comes bone density. I'm sure you guys have heard that bone density changes. You have a handout, the types of physical activity, because weight-bearing exercises can help your bone density. And of course, women, after menopause, they tend to lose a bit more bone mass. And so the weight-bearing exercises can help reduce the fractures. And of course, always talk to your doctor before you start an exercise program. And then also following a calcium-rich diet. So on the handout, it talks about some aerobic activity to strengthen muscles, improve your balance, and increase flexibility. And what I like about this is it's very simple. It's not going to the Y and doing Zumba. Some things that you can do from your chair, and that can help with balance and other things. So, oh yeah, sorry. It's the blue one, the physical activity. And we'll talk a bit more about the calcium as we go further. So other changes, digestion. As we age, our digestion slows down. We generate less saliva and stomach acid, which can help hinder, actually, the process of digesting some vitamins and minerals, and we'll get into that. But one way to really increase the digestion is increasing your fiber. With fiber, of course, males typically need about 30 grams a day, and females about 21 grams a day. And all of these statistics are geared for men and women over the age of 51. And of course, anytime you increase your fiber intake, you always want to increase your water intake because that's going to help for a smooth transition. You never want to increase fiber and not increase your fluids because that can cause a bit more issues. Medication and illness. Often certain medications, even over-the-counter prescription ones as well, can affect your appetite and taste. So it's important to talk with your doctor to learn the side effects of your medications that you're taking and how those will interact with your appetite or change the way that foods taste, or even what foods you cannot eat while taking this medicine, or the time period in between eating a meal and do I take this medication with food, that type of thing. So make sure you talk to the doctor or pharmacist about that. And lifestyle changes. Loneliness and depression can really affect our appetite. Some people, when they're lonely or depressed, they may not eat at all. Some people may be an emotional eater and tend to eat even more under stressful situations or any type of change. Death or divorce can affect our appetite because newly single seniors may not know how to cook for themselves. They may just not feel like cooking at all either. A budget can change. Now we may just be on one income. And they may not be able to necessarily afford the healthy, balanced diet that they had in the past. So now we've talked about how changes that happen to our body as we age, in addition to some external factors, and how they affect our appetite and our health. And it's really important to pay attention to all of those because one thing that we definitely want to avoid is malnutrition. And older adults are more at risk for malnutrition. And what that is it is the lack of adequate nutrition to maintain health. So malnutrition is caused by eating too little food, eating too few nutrients, and digestive problems related to aging. So one thing that may lead to malnutrition would be poor fitting dentures. We're not able to chew as well. We may not be able to swallow as well. We may be taking too big of bites. Also, older adults may not have the means to transport food or have access to food, or even just like we talked about with the vision, even preparing their food. So all of those play a role in that. So effects of malnutrition, fatigue, depression, anemia, weakness. And then the next slide, we're going to look at the top 10 warning signs of malnutrition. Okay? So you may notice a lack of appetite, the stopping going out to eat. Depression, as we had said before, can really affect the appetite. Sudden weight change. Are they losing a lot more weight, or is there even a gain in weight? Malnutrition doesn't necessarily mean really tiny and weight loss. Mal means bad, so it can be just poor nutrition as well. Expired food, as we talked about. Skin tone. It may be a little bit more dull instead of the shinier that we're used to. Lethargy, cognitive problems, taking more than 3 meds. As we said, medications can really affect appetite, so maybe that's what's going on. And then, of course, any recent illness or hospital stay. And then I want to turn to one more handout. I really like this one. It's 10 senior mealtime challenges, and it talks about different scenarios or situations that can affect our appetite, but then it also gives tips on ways to overcome that. So, for example, the number 1, lack of companionship during meal times. I'm on the purple one as well. 62% of seniors report that. So with the tip here, if you can't be there to dine with a loved one, do options as asking friends and neighbors to check in, or special activities at churches, senior centers, and then, of course, Area 10 that can help with that. So keep this handout. I thought that was quite interesting. Grocery shopping, we're going to give some tips on that. The loss of appetite we've talked about, eating too much food, and then eating too little food. So one major important way to reduce the risk of malnutrition is to focus on nutrient-dense foods. As we age, our calorie needs tend to decrease, but our vitamin and mineral needs are still the same. So that's where nutrient-dense foods really play a vital role. Foods that are high in their vitamin and mineral content and typically low in calories are a nutrient-dense food. So can we go back? It's okay. So for example, a low-fat milk is more nutrient-dense than a whole milk. The vitamin, the mineral content, it is all the same. The only difference between that type of milk is the fat calories, or the fat and then the calories from fat. So that's the only difference there. Does that make sense? And then, of course, a whole grain bread versus a white bread is a more nutrient-dense food. Foods that are fortified, and then lower fat versions of the meats, milk, dairy products, and eggs like we talked about. So those play a very big role. So next up is MyPlate. Has anyone heard of MyPlate? We're familiar with it? Yes. What that did was that replaced My Pyramid. So it kind of gives you a visual representation of when we sit down at the dinner table, this is what our ideal plate should look like. And what that is half of your plate's fruits and vegetables. We want a little bit more fruits than vegetables, or vegetables than fruits rather. A quarter of your plate grains, a quarter of your plate protein, and then our dairy up on top. So when we talk about MyPlate, this is what we're referring to. And there's the website for this, choosemyplate.gov. It's on the references slide at the end. And with that, you can actually go online and identify specific requirements for your gender, your age, or activity level. So this is just the general representation of MyPlate. So some specific nutrient needs. All of these come from the USDA, and they are for women and men over the age of 51. So with calories, these two estimates are based on someone that gets less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. So if you actually get more than that, you're probably going to need more calories. Protein can be a bit of a tricky step as we age. Protein plays a major role in the building and repairing of muscles and tissues. So sometimes when we're stressed on the body or chronic illness, that can increase our protein needs a bit, but you never really want to take that on yourself. Always talk to a doctor or a dietitian, because as we age, our body may make less protein, but also if we eat too much protein, it can put some excess stress on our kidneys, and it can affect kidney function. So that's why that's really important to pay attention to that. So for females, about 5 ounces, males, 5.5 ounces. Rule of thumb, if you look at the palm of your hand, that's about 3 ounces. The size of a deck of cards is about 3 ounces of meat, that type of thing. So often when you go out, though, think about a slab of meat that you may get. It's going to be a lot larger. Yes, ma'am?
Does the protein portion mean a protein-rich food or actual protein that's in the food?
Actual protein, like chicken breast.
But what I mean is some of the chicken breast may not be protein. It might be something else.
Right. No.
So
I see what you're saying. Just the actual protein.
Okay.
Yeah. So 5 ounces, 5.5 ounces. Grains, you want to focus on the whole grains. There's a difference between simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. With this, you want to go for more complex carbohydrates, because what those are, they're higher in fiber, and it takes longer for the body to break it down, so you're going to feel fuller longer. So an example of that would be a sweet potato versus a white potato, or again, the whole grain bread versus the white bread. Does that make sense? And about 60% of your total calories from the day should come from carbohydrates or grains. And then the next slide, fruits, vegetables, dairy, and water. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, eat a rainbow on your fruits and vegetables. And where that really comes from is when we're talking about the nutrient-dense foods. So you want to go for the dark leafy greens, the dark oranges. The more color it has, the more nutrients that food is going to provide to you. Also with fruits, the closer that we can get to eating the skin, the more nutrients and fiber that you're going to get. So for example, eating the apple peel, eating the sweet potato peel with the sweet potato, you're going to get more fiber and more nutrients the closer you get to the peel. Does that make sense?
Including the peel.
Huh?
Including the peel.
Yes. Like eating the skin of your potato, you're going to increase your nutrients than if you were to just scoop it out.
60% number you...
For carbohydrates, when you look at your total calories for the day, you should be getting about 60% of that from carbohydrates. So that includes, though, fruits or carbohydrates, things like that. So fruits, 1.5 cups for women, 2 cups for men. If you guys notice, most of the time men get more than us women on what we eat. That's just, and yet they're not going to gain the weight like we would. At least that's my experience. Dairy, 3 cups. And then water. Water, generally as a nutrient, receives little attention once we start to walk and grow. It kind of comes on the back burner, but really it plays a lot of roles and essential functions as it reduces stress on kidney function. It also helps aid in the constipation like we talked about, kind of clearing things out when we increase our fiber. And with the aging process, the ability to detect thirst really decreases. So you should never wait until you're thirsty to start drinking. You want to aim to get the 5 to 8 glasses per day, and sometimes keeping a cup like the one that you have there or a water bottle handy so that you can visually see, okay, am I drinking it? Because sometimes you may not think about it.
The dairy,
Uh-huh.
different dairy products have different densities, so what does 3 cups equate to?
That 3 cups with the densities, I'm not getting that specific. This is just,
Well, cheese is higher density than a glass of milk.
yes. Well, so that would be your serving for cheese is 2 ounces. This would be 1 cup of milk or a half a cup of yogurt.
Yogurt, yeah.
Does that make sense? You can also get,
There's either ice cream or yogurt, and I couldn't decide which I was doing.
yeah. We're going to go with the yogurt while we're here. So reading the serving sizes and that thing. And when I talked about My Plate, they can give you more specific serving sizes, that type of thing, and those portion controls. But yes, you don't have to just drink milk to get that in. Yogurt, beans are a great source because with the dairy, we're looking at calcium, dark leafy greens, things like that. And we'll get into calcium a little bit more in just a moment. So any questions about the My Plate at this point? Yes.
What are some of the best substitutes for meat and protein?
Tofu, of course, is a good one. Beans. A lot of people kind of play down beans and they're not, I don't really like beans. Beans is a wonderful protein source. It is a lot cheaper than your red meats. And then sometimes with beans, when you combine them with a carbohydrate like beans and rice, you make that complete protein that you would get. So that's why, just eating beans alone wouldn't necessarily give you all of that protein, but beans matched with like a carbohydrate type thing would do that. So we did tofu, beans, eggs, of course. Fish, yeah, would be a substitute for the red meat.
Lentils,
Yes.
legumes.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So you were talking about the sources of protein, and it said 5 ounces of protein, so that's for the entire day?
For the entire day. Yes, it's 5 ounces.
Chicken breast looks like
Yes. That's why in our society, we are so focused on protein. And you're going to hear that a lot. Just, I got to get my protein in. In reality, 5 ounces is all you need. Now, like I said, as we age, protein can be a bit tricky depending on chronic disease and things like that if there's been an illness or hospital stay.
kidneys, it can adversely affect.
Yes, too much protein. Too much protein can affect the kidneys. So that's why, like I said, when you go out to dinner and you get a steak or something like that, you're probably getting double your protein requirements for that time. Yes, sir.
What do you think about the Ensure and Boost drinks?
If a loved one is having a hard time eating or chewing, and that's what you can get in them, then most definitely go for it. Yes.
With those, like, the drinks like Boost, when my mother had her stroke and dementia set in, she was having all kind of issues, she would rely too much on the booze, she would be drinking that with so much water, she wouldn't be eating any of her food.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had to cut her back on that,
Mm-hmm.
and then she would eat more, and then her doctor even said, she's drinking too much, because she'd always come to his office with her water jug with her.
Uh-huh.
And she just would drink the Boost and think she was fine.
Yeah. It's the same thing with little kids when we talk about drinking your calories. And I know with my son, sometimes if he's not eating the meal, I'll take away the milk until after the meal is over and do it that way. But it goes along with drinking. It's a lot easier to drink than it is to chew and eat. So that's where you got to really go back and think about, okay, why are they not necessarily wanting to eat? Is it the environment? Am I not sitting down with them? Can they not physically chew it? But you're right, and kind of decreasing those and then offering more solid
Or
foods.
the denture's not fitting right now, she's lost weight.
Yes. Always check that. Yes, sir.
I was told to give this booster Ensure right before bedtime.
In place of like the mealtime or the bedtime snack.
Or sometimes she won't even eat supper. and is not hungry.
And sometimes with that, I mean, you may look into, is she, as she said, drinking too much liquids before? That can affect appetite. There may be a lot of factors. Did she typically have an evening snack beforehand? No, so that may be it. And you can talk to an actual a dietitian that's with the hospital and refer, and they can talk about ways to increase calorie content and things like that. And if you're concerned with weight loss, focusing on more, higher fat content foods, adding things in that way may help gain weight. So, to answer your questions. Okay. So let's go on now to the vitamins and minerals. Vitamin deficiencies may not be as obvious in older adults. However, any illness or recent stress may take away all the stores that they had of vitamins and minerals, and then that person is left depleted in that. So medications interfere with some vitamins, and when you go to the doctor and they look at drug histories, are you taking supplements, things like that, then they may be able to better identify any nutrient deficiencies. And again, as we age, our calorie needs decrease, but our vitamin and mineral needs stay the same. So you really want to look at that. So with vitamin D and calcium, with your loved ones, it's really important to provide vitamin D, fortified milk for the housebound, nursing home residents, and anyone who does not get the adequate amounts of the sunlight. And then they've shown that appropriate levels of vitamin D or sun exposure offer some protection against loss of bone when combined with adequate amounts of calcium. So for example, an older adult, if they were to have a glass of milk at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then bedtime, they would typically be meeting all of their calcium and vitamin D needs as well. Does that make sense?
What's the danger of too much vitamin D?
In our society, there's not too much vitamin D that's known.
Supplements.
For the supplements, that's something I can get back to you on, because like I said, not many people have adequate levels regardless of vitamin D, because we are you need to wear your sunscreen, limit sun exposure, things like that, but they have fortified our foods. But I can get back with you on that afterwards to find out like the toxicity level.
There's a current fad, if you will, of how our society is radically under on vitamin D. And now I don't know what UG means, but they come to the IU, whatever that means. International units, and they're recommending over 2,000 IUs a day. And I don't know if that's a lot, if that's dangerous or what.
Well, I will say, and this is just a personal note, I just had a baby and I am nursing her, and so they checked my vitamin D levels, and my doctor has prescribed me 100,000 micrograms each week. I take 250,000 doses. So
Does that equate to the IU?
that I'm gonna have to get back with you with, because when I talk about, yes, we'll have to manipulate some of that, a little out of practice on that one. So I'll get back with you, but when you hear of the larger numbers, I'm really not too surprised, because as a society we are very well low on the vitamin D. But that's why they fortified it in other foods.
How do you know where to draw the line on nutritional supplements? There's, especially the big box stores, there's entire departments dedicated to every conceivable kind of nutritional supplement. And I confess to taking probably more than I should. I just kind of feel like I'm hedging my bets. I mean, how can you tell if you're doing yourself or your person you're caring for any good?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. The question was how to know if you are taking too many supplements or if you're not taking enough supplements. And I would say, one, look at your diet for starters. If you are generally getting a My Plate representation 3 times a day, variety of colors, eating a variety of foods, you're probably doing okay to not necessarily need to supplement. But I would always say go to a dietitian, go to even your pharmacist, because a lot of the times big chain stores will have a variety of vitamin E's and fish oils, and you really have to learn to read the fine print, because it may not necessarily be the pure form of that. So that's when you can go to the pharmacist and ask, is this a true one?
The experts that I've spoken to have told me that it's your body just processes it and comes right out in your urine. Most of your supplements are wasting your urine.
And it depends, right? If it's a water-soluble vitamin, then yeah, most likely, then you're just going to excrete that way. But there's a fine line. And a lot of people say that it's often hard to reach that toxicity level and over-supplement, but you never know, because some people may think that I really need this and completely go a little bit overboard. So I would say talk to your pharmacist. With the iron, of course, when you're low in iron stores, you can feel more fatigued, bruise easily, things like that. So you want to look for iron-rich foods, which is, again, the meats, organ meats, of course. But if you're not a meat eater, you can also get it from plant sources, beans, peanut butter, dark leafy greens again. And one trick to help your body better absorb the iron is to have a source of vitamin C with it. So for breakfast, if you're going to have a whole grain cereal, have a glass of juice. Or if you want to have a slice of peanut butter toast, have a slice of fruit with it. And then vegetables with fish or chicken, things like that will help absorb your iron.
Why do the supplements for seniors often leave out the iron?
I'm not for sure. They are very, yes, that's a wonderful thing, yes. When you take an iron supplement, I know that a lot of prenatals sometimes don't want to take their prenatal vitamins because that's a key side effect is constipation. Also, I don't know if as women age in the menstruation and they're having less blood loss, they may not need that extra. And then with zinc, 40% in the average American diet, their zinc intake comes from meat, fish, and poultry. It's important for taste sensation. So when we talk about maybe our taste declining, making sure that we're getting adequate levels of zinc can actually improve your taste acuity. And some sources for that, like I said, were meat, fish, poultry, breakfast cereals, and oysters are really high in zinc as well. That was kind of interesting. So vitamin B6 is pyridoxine. Men 1.7 and women 1.5. And sometimes B6 is a problem nutrient because B6 is really found in meats. And as we age, we talked about the dentures and not being able to chew as well. So our meat intake may decrease. And sometimes supplements may be needed. B6 usually is an injection, depending on how severe the issue is. But if you're not able to chew the meats, you can also do bananas and potatoes and other vegetables are good with B6. And so then B12 requires intrinsic factor. And when we don't have that, it decreases the B12. So men and women are 2.4 micrograms. And B12 deficiencies can cause deterioration in mental function, changes in personality, and loss of physical coordination. So again, some sources for that are fish, meat, poultry, eggs, milk products, and cereals are typically fortified in B12. You'll notice a lot of the time we do fortification in foods.
What is
What are the
intrinsic factor?
cereals that are fortified?
Most all cereals are fortified with it, especially the whole grain ones. Again, they'll do that and put that in there.
What are the old, can you list the whole grain cereals that are available?
Not all of them because they are too many to name, too numerous to name. But you know, Fiber One, multigrain Cheerios, Raisin Bran, oatmeal is phenomenal in it. And I'll tell you a trick when we're label reading and you're looking for whole grains. A lot of the time, a label may say whole grain, but then you read it, and that first ingredient should say whole grain, whole oat, whole rye, whole wheat, that type of thing. Because if it doesn't say that, then they've typically taken some things out and put a few back in. So if you see enriched, that is not a whole grain food. So that's one key part in finding the whole grains, is that first ingredient should be whole grains. So now that we've talked about all of that stuff, now I'm just going to get into very just general meal ideas. You'll have a handout cooking for one or for two, and we can read through that in a bit. But for breakfast, some general things, three main components that you kind of want to try to aim for are high fiber breads and cereals, colorful fruit, and protein. So you can have that veggie omelet, oatmeal with dried fruits, nuts, and honey, because we talked about the benefits of the whole grain with oatmeal and the fiber with that. peanut butter and whole grain toast with a slice of fruit. So these are just very generic samples for breakfast. And then we move to lunch, whole grain breads, lean protein, fiber. So veggie quesadilla on whole wheat tortilla. Again, we try to get those whole wheats in there. USDA would encourage everyone to have 50% of their grains come from whole grains. That's kind of our basic aim, is to try to think 50% of our grains need to be from whole ones. Veggie stew with whole wheat noodles, just some simple lunches. So for dinner, again, grains, vegetables, protein. And I'm not saying that you have to limit it to these three. These are just some meal ideas that we can kind of well balance. So grilled salmon with some salsa, whole wheat pasta where we've added the broccoli and shrimp to it, or some cut up chicken, that type of thing. And then always, like we talked about with potatoes, you want to go for a sweet potato instead of a white potato, and a grilled meat instead of a fried meat, of course. And then snacking. Snacking is a good thing. Some people think that you shouldn't snack and just have your basic meals. But snacking can be fun as long as we choose healthful items. So the almonds and raisins, veggies and hummus. Has anybody had hummus? Love hummus. Yes, I'm a huge hummus fan. It's kind of my new go-to. Cottage cheese, apples, peanut butter, yogurt, things like that.
What's your chocolate?
Where's the chocolate? Well, dark chocolate, of course, in moderation, but it does have the antioxidants in it. Yeah. We'll put chocolates in there. Yeah, that we're getting a little bit away. Remember, we didn't talk about empty calories, did we? Oh, and we're going right before lunch, so that's why we're throwing all these out, right? I'm standing between you and lunch. So overcoming obstacles for healthy eating. Hopefully that 10 senior mealtime challenges will kind of provide you with some ideas, but also some cooking tips for one. Cook once, eat twice. Most soups, stews, and casseroles freeze very well. So you can cook once and then freeze the rest of the servings, but you always want to make sure that you're writing the date on the foods and make sure that you're rotating them so that we're not getting stockpiled back there of older foods, because we got to watch that expiration date. Reinvent leftovers. If you don't want the same meal that you had last night, I know I do that sometimes. I'm like, I don't want that pasta again or that chicken, but if you take the chicken and throw it with some rice and vegetables and a tortilla, add some salsa and cheese, we've got a whole new meal. So just kind of get creative with it. My husband, when we do like a spaghetti, then he'll take it the next day and add vegetables and do a pasta bake, lasagna type thing. So it changes it up a bit. Don't be afraid to be creative. One of the best things, one of the positive things about maybe cooking for yourself and eating alone is you get to decide what you want to eat. You get to decide what herbs and spices you like. You get to decide what food you like. You're not cooking to entertain someone else or to make sure that they enjoy it. You get to cook for yourself. So don't be afraid to be creative. Shopping tips for one. Of course, stock up when items are on sale. Look for the circular flyers, the ads, that type of thing. Meal planning for the week to help you identify these are what foods I want to eat. Only shop for those foods. That can really help with a budget. So bulk bins can be your friend. Whole grains like rice and oats, do you hear me? Oats and millet can be bought in small amounts, or you can store them in jars or containers. I know I saw something where they'd taken just a 2-liter empty bottle and cleaned it out really good, and then you can store beans and that type of thing in that container. It doesn't have to necessarily be a fancy container. So legumes, like we had talked about for the protein source, red, green legumes, split peas, beans, they can be stored in jars. Nuts and seeds, those you typically want to buy in smaller amounts so that you can eat them while they're fresh. And then moving on to canned and boxed foods. Once they're opened, of course, then you'll need to use them relatively quickly. So try to buy in smaller amounts. You can buy canned beans, of course, vegetables, fruits. When buying in the canned form, before you eat them, make sure that you rinse them under the sink because you can reduce the sodium content that way. Just run them under the water. Of course, when we're looking at fruits, you can buy applesauce, peaches, that type of thing, but you always want to go for natural juices or in the unsweet form. Stay away from the heavy because they have just saturated that with sugar. And then so on the handout, the cooking for 1 or 2, It talks, of course, about my plate, enjoying your meals. I like this part where it talks about reducing recipes, because I know that's one thing that I hear a lot is, well, I don't know how to cook for a small number of people. I'm used to a family of 6. How do I cook for 1? So that one, it can show you how to make half a recipe and making 1/3 of a recipe to kind of change the ingredients so that you don't have a massive amount and you're trying to throw it at your neighbors to get rid of it so they can eat it as well. So that one, stocking your pantry, refrigerator, using your leftovers, and then there's some recipes on the back, some sites that you can find some recipes, meal for you, all recipes, that type of thing. And then it gives you some menu ideas.